Today I'll be giving you another 2026 prediction, but this time with the governor's map. So let's start out with the safe states for the Democrats and the Republicans. So for the Democrats, we have Oregon, California, Colorado, Hawaii, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Maryland, and Maine. And so that's going to put Democrats, and also Illinois. So that puts Democrats at 10 safe states. Now let's go to the Republican safe states. We have Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Iowa, Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, South Carolina, Vermont, and New Hampshire, putting Republican safe states at 13. Now, before we go to the likely states, let's look at Trump's approval ratings. So there's been a very big variation. So some polls have him with a plus 18% approval rating, and some have with a disapproval rating of -1. For the most part, Trump has a good approval rating, and people are liking how he's handling his job so far. Now, I'm sure in about a year, he's going to have more of a disapproval rating as many other presidents do coming up to a midterm, but I don't think it's going to be a repeat of 2018, and so I'm going to keep that in mind as I do this prediction. So now let's go to the likely states. So my first likely state that I'm going to have for the Republicans is going to be Alaska. Now, if we look at Alaska back in 2022, we see that Dunleavy won by 26 points. But the reason why he won by 26 points is because he didn't have to go to a second ballot to reach 50%. If he did, most likely a lot of the people who voted for Walker, the independent, would have gone for Guerra, and that would have pushed the Democrats' percentage up, and I don't think that Dunleavy would have won by a safe margin. And also there are some rumors that Mary Peltola might run in Alaska. Mary Peltola was the representative from Alaska from 2022 to 2024. She did get ousted this year, but she still is pretty popular. So for right now, I'm going to put this in the likely margin, considering that's also going to be more of a leftward-leaning environment. The next state that I have as a likely state is the state of Texas. Now, if we look back in 2022, we see that Abbott won by 10 points. Now, I don't know if Abbott's going to run again. I think he's been governor for Texas for a pretty long time. I don't know if Texas has term limits or something. But I don't think, of course, Abbott's number that he won by in 2022 is below the 12% margin for a safe margin. And so even though Trump won by 14 points, it's going to be a midterm year, so I do think it's going to be bumped down to a likely margin. Another state that I have as a likely margin is the state of Kansas. Now, this will actually be a flip for the Republican Party. If we look back at 2022, we see that Laura Kelly won by 2.2%. Now, she was an incumbent, and she is the governor of Kansas right now, but she is term limited, meaning that she cannot run again. And when you look at Kansas, really the only one that might be able to do well is maybe Sheriff Davids, who is a congresswoman in Kansas, in a blue part of Kansas. But other than that, Kansas Democrats don't have too many good options. And I think that even if Sheriff Davids did run, I don't think she would win. And so maybe if Laura Kelly could possibly run again, which she can't, maybe Kansas would stay in the Democrat column, but since she is term limited, I do think that Republicans will be able to flip this back. Another one that I have as a likely margin is the state of Ohio. Now, looking back at 2022, we see that DeWine won by 25 points. Now, DeWine is a very popular governor, and that's the reason why he won by 25 points. But there is speculation that Vivek Ramaswamy might run in Ohio. And I think if Ramaswamy ran in Ohio, I think this would be bumped down to a likely margin, considering that Vivek Ramaswamy doesn't really appeal to a lot of independent and Democrat voters. He appeals a lot more to Republican voters. So for that reason, I'm going to have this as a likely margin. And then my last state that I'm going to have as a likely margin is the state of Nevada. Now, looking at Nevada, we see that Trump won this state by 3.1%. And Joe Lombardo actually unseated an incumbent governor, Steve Sisolak. And Joe Lombardo is one of the most well-liked governors in the nation by his constituents. He's very, very popular. He's kind of like Glenn Youngkin and almost like Phil Scott. But because he's so popular, I do think he's going to hold on by a likely margin. Now let's go to the Democrats' likely margins. First one that we have is Pennsylvania. That's going to be a likely margin. Looking back at 2022, we see that Josh Shapiro won by 14.8%. A very, very big margin. He was up against Doug Mastriano, who actually was at January 6th. And so he was a very, very polarizing figure. He did not appeal to Democrats and not to a lot of independents. And that's why you saw such a big blowout win for Josh Shapiro. And I know that a big reason why Josh Shapiro won by this big of a margin is because of how bad Doug Mastriano is as a candidate. But also Josh Shapiro does have some of the highest approval ratings in the country. And so with all those factors in mind, I do think that Josh Shapiro would win by a likely margin. Another state that I have as a likely margin is the state of Minnesota. Now looking at Minnesota, we see that Harris won Minnesota by 4.2%. And then Tim Walz won by 7.7% in what was supposed to be a red wave 2022, which didn't really end up happening. Now, I'm not sure if Tim Walz can run again, so I probably do need to look into that. But I do think that Minnesota, especially in a more leftward leaning environment, is going to vote for Democrats by a likely margin. And then one more state that I have is the state of New Mexico. Now looking at New Mexico, we see that Grisham won by 6.4% against Ron Chetty. She was the incumbent. Grisham won by 6.4%. So possibly this could be a lean margin. I'm debating whether to put this into a lean margin or a likely margin. But for right now, I think I'm going to put it in the likely margin. Now we have 5 last states. We have Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, and New York. Let's go to the lean margins. The first one that I have as a lean margin is the state of Wisconsin. Now looking at the 2024 election, you would have thought that Donald Trump would do better in Wisconsin, considering that it was his best state in the 2020 election out of the swing states, Rust Belt states. But he only won it by 8.6%, and Trump won Michigan by 1.4%, and Pennsylvania by 1.7%. It was his least strongest performance. Now, considering that, and also that back in 2022, Tony Evers won against a very, very funded challenger to him, I do believe that Democrats will be able to hold this on by a lean margin. Now, I do have one lean margin for the Republicans, and that's going to be Georgia. Now, the governor of Georgia is term limited. Brian Kemp, he won by 7.5%, and he's very, very popular. So Republicans are going to have to pick somebody else to run for governor in Georgia. Now, I think if they pick someone like Herschel Walker, they could definitely lose this Georgia seat. But this is assuming that they pick someone who is able to appeal to moderate voters. And Georgia is known for that, or for picking more moderate voters. Politicians, I should say, Brian Kemp, Brad Raffensperger, all of those ones are pretty moderate. And so if they do pick a moderate, I do think that Republicans will win Georgia by a lean margin. And then we have 3 last states, Michigan, Arizona, and New York, which is crazy to think that New York is coming so much to the right that it could be one of the closest states in the country. But let's start off in Arizona. So in Arizona, Katie Hobbs is the governor, and she is not very well liked in Arizona. She really only won in 2022 because Kari Lake was just such a bad candidate and really alienated a large part of the Republican Party, the McCain Republicans. But considering that now Kari Lake's not going to run again, I think if Republicans pick a good person, I think they're going to flip this by a tilt margin. Just because you see Arizona voted for Trump by 5.5%, a pretty good margin for Trump. And so that's why I have this into the tilt Republican column. And then we have two more races, Michigan and New York. Now, Michigan, there's something really interesting going on here. Mike Duggan, who's the governor of Detroit, the Democratic governor of Detroit, is going to be running as an independent. And then Democrats are going to put up a candidate and Republicans are going to put up a candidate. So what this is going to do is it's going to split the Democrat vote. And this would be a really good scenario for Republicans. Now, Donald Trump won Michigan by 1.4%. Whitmer is term limited. She won by 10.5%. So I do think that because the Democrat vote is going to be split, I see Republicans narrowly pulling off this one in Michigan. And the last state that I have is the state of New York. Now, in New York, Kathy Hochul, in a poll, showed that only 48% of New Yorkers approve of her job, of how she's handling her job, while 42% say that they disapprove of how she's handling her job. And so that is not good for Kathy Hochul. And also, there's been speculation that Mike Lawler might run for governor. Now, if you guys don't know who Mike Lawler is, he's a GOP congressman who outran Trump by a lot. I'm pretty sure he was actually in a district that Harris won. And he's very, very popular in his district. He won by like 6 or 7 points. And so, even though this is going to be a good environment for Republicans in New York, I don't think it's going to be enough to flip the governorship to Republican, and so that's why I'm going to have it in the tilt Democrat column. So this is my updated prediction for January of 2025. Democrats would win 15 governorships, and Republicans would win 21, with the flips being Arizona, Kansas, and Michigan. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to smash the like button down below and subscribe. Comment your thoughts or suggestions in the comments section down below. Shout out to Diana Barbie, our first channel member. If you would like to become a member, you can join near my channel logo. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.